My stepmom installed cameras in my bedroom for safety, then live-streamed me sleeping to hundreds of strangers. When I begged my dad to believe me, to just look at the site himself, he rubbed his temples and said, "She's a licensed therapist. You're just confused." I didn't say a word. That was 4 months ago. This morning, she was crying in a courthouse hallway, clutching a revoked medical license. My mom died giving birth to my baby sister. Neither of them made it. I was 17, standing in the hospital hallway when they told us, watching my dad collapse against the wall. 6 months later, he married Patricia, his grief counselor. She moved in with her bright pink throw pillows and her psychology degrees, talking about healthy healing environments while boxing up mom's things. Patricia started her campaign immediately. Teen boys process grief through anger, she'd tell dad over dinner, watching me cut my steak. We need to be proactive about safety. Dad nodded along, still hollow-eyed, desperate for someone to tell him how to fix us. Within weeks, she'd convinced him I was a ticking time bomb. Statistics show boys who lose their mothers violently often develop aggressive tendencies, she'd say, rubbing his shoulder while I sat right there. The cameras came first. For everyone's protection, Patricia explained, installing them in my bedroom, the hallway, even facing my bathroom door. Dad helped her mount them, avoiding my eyes. Next, she locked up my baseball equipment, my hockey gear, even my old skateboard. Potential weapons, she called them. My bedroom door lock disappeared overnight. No secrets in a healing household. Dad started flinching when I moved too quickly, keeping Patricia between us like a shield. I'd reach for the salt and he'd tense up. I'd walk into a room and he'd find reasons to leave. I started sleeping in my closet to avoid the cameras, using my backpack as a pillow. But I never missed visiting Mom's grave on Saturdays. I'd bike 8 miles each way, bringing fresh daisies, her favorites. I'd tell her about Patricia's latest interventions, about how Dad looked at me like I was dangerous. Patricia redecorated obsessively, painting every wall bright pink because color psychology promotes calm in troubled minds. She threw out Mom's reading chair, her recipe books, even the quilt Grandma made. Holding on to the past prevents healing, she'd say, replacing everything with her modern, sterile furniture. Patricia monitored everything. My phone, my laptop, my school emails. She'd read my texts aloud at dinner, analyzing them for concerning patterns. When I complained, she'd touch Dad's arm and remind him about teenage male volatility statistics. I helped her redecorate, carried her boxes, smiled when she introduced me as her special project to her colleagues. I played the grateful stepson while dying inside, because fighting back would only prove her point. Senior year, I applied to Mom's alma mater in secret, using the school library computers. When the acceptance letter arrived, Patricia got to it first. That night at dinner, she placed it on the table like evidence. College would be too stressful, she announced. Environmental changes can trigger violent episodes in at-risk youth. Dad stared at his plate. What do you think? I asked him directly. He glanced at Patricia. Patricia knows best. She's the professional. She smiled, tearing my acceptance letter in half. We'll look into online programs. More structured, safer. I broke that night. My friend Craig found me at the park late at night, on the swings where Mom used to push me. He took me to his house, let me crash on his couch. The next day, everything shattered. Craig pulled me aside after school, his face pale. Dude, you need to see this. He showed me his phone. A website was pulled up that had videos of me in my room, changing clothes, sleeping. Time stamped from Patricia's cameras. The site was subscription-based, with hundreds of paying viewers, live stream schedules, comment sections full of requests. I threw up in Craig's bathroom. We decided together it would be best to break into my old home and find more evidence against her, and then go to the police. Patricia's laptop history showed she'd been posting the videos for months. Her psychology notes were actually fantasy scenarios viewers requested. Troubled teen strips down after nightmare. Angry boy works out shirtless. Each video titled like case studies. I couldn't go home. Couldn't warn Dad without alerting Patricia. If she knew I'd discovered the site, she'd delete everything before I could get proof. I stayed with Craig for 3 days, skipping school, trying to figure out what to do. Patricia must have noticed the drop in viewers. She called Dad, spinning her story. He's having an episode. Classic flight response. Could turn aggressive. Then she escalated. Craig's mom got a call from the police. Patricia had reported me as a dangerous runaway with violent tendencies, said I'd threatened her, that she was my licensed therapist, and I needed immediate intervention. The officers who came to Craig's house looked skeptical as I explained everything, showing them screenshots Craig had saved. They said I could file charges, but Patricia had already taken the videos down. Without the actual site, it was my word against a licensed psychologist. If I went home to gather evidence, she'd destroy it. If I stayed away, she'd keep escalating. The officer handed me his card. Document everything you can. We'll need proof. I stood in Craig's driveway, watching them leave, knowing Patricia had won. She'd isolated me from my dad, stolen my future, and turned me into a product. And somehow, she'd made it all look like therapy. I sat in Craig's car staring at the printouts he'd made from Patricia's laptop history. The forum posts made my stomach turn. Grief Counselors United, a private discussion board where Patricia had been sharing details about me for months. Clinical language barely disguised the personal information. Subject exhibits typical avoidance patterns, one post read. Flight response confirms deterioration as predicted. Craig drove us to the pharmacy while I scrolled through more posts. Patricia was backing up her research files somewhere, adding notes about my behavior. The timestamp on her latest entry was from this morning. She documented my absence as evidence of escalating instability. Inside the pharmacy, I headed straight for the prescription counter. Dad's new medication sat waiting in a white paper bag. The pharmacist pulled it down just as Patricia appeared beside me, reaching for the same shelf. She carried a stack of manila folders labeled with patient numbers. The pharmacist glanced between us. Patricia smiled professionally while I stood frozen. She picked up her own prescription bag, the label visible for a moment. Anti-anxiety medication, same as Dad's but different dosage. His father's prescription, Patricia told the pharmacist smoothly. I'm managing his medications now. Medical proxy. She showed a laminated card. The pharmacist nodded and made a note in the computer. The dosage has increased quite a bit from last month. Make sure he's not experiencing any confusion or memory issues. Patricia's hand tightened on her folders. Everything's being monitored carefully. The words burst out before I could stop them. She's recording me for her sick research. My voice cracked, came out garbled with emotion. The pharmacist stepped back. Other customers turned to stare. A teenager yelling at a well-dressed professional woman about privacy. I could see how it looked. Patricia's expression shifted to concern. The perfect performance of a worried stepmother. He's having a difficult time, she explained calmly. Grief manifests in many ways. I grabbed Dad's prescription and left, my face burning. In the parking lot, Craig was talking on his phone. His mom's voice carried through the speaker, mentioning Patricia's blog about parenting through trauma. She needed guidance for an upcoming custody evaluation with Craig's younger siblings. Patricia's been so helpful, his mom was saying. Her insights about teenage behavior are invaluable. I slumped in the passenger seat. Patricia's influence was spreading beyond my family. Craig ended the call looking troubled. I have to take you somewhere, I told him. Dad has a doctor's appointment in an hour. Craig hesitated. What about confronting Patricia at her office, getting actual evidence? The choice felt impossible. Confront Patricia directly and risk her destroying evidence, or check on Dad, who'd been increasingly confused lately. The prescription bag felt heavy in my lap. Patricia had been managing his medications for weeks now. Dad first, I decided. Something's wrong with his medications. At the medical building, I found Dad already in the waiting room. He looked up when I entered, blinking slowly like he was trying to focus. His shirt was buttoned wrong. Weren't you at school? He asked, words slightly slurred. Before I could answer, Patricia emerged from the doctor's office holding a clipboard. She'd arrived before us, already inside discussing Dad's case. The receptionist handed her more forms. I'm listed as his medical proxy now, Patricia announced, not looking at me. Given his cognitive decline from grief, someone needs to make medical decisions. Dad nodded absently, not seeming to process what she'd said. I watched him struggle to sign where Patricia pointed. His signature looked shaky, different from just weeks ago. The doctor called us back. Patricia positioned herself between Dad and me, guiding him with a hand on his elbow. In the examination room, she answered most of the doctor's questions while Dad sat quietly. He's been forgetting things, Patricia explained. Missing time, confusion about recent events, classic symptoms of grief-induced cognitive impairment. The doctor made notes while examining Dad. When he asked Dad about his medications, Patricia produced a typed list from her folder. I've been managing them to ensure compliance. Dad tried to answer a question about his sleep patterns, but got confused halfway through. I reached over to steady him when he swayed slightly. Patricia immediately started documenting on her phone. Please don't agitate him, she said sharply. He becomes disoriented when overwhelmed. The doctor suggested neurological tests. Oh wow. The way she frames the OP's every normal reaction as dangerous, while simultaneously exploiting him, shows some crazy manipulation skills. Patricia agreed immediately, already pulling out her calendar to schedule follow-ups. Dad just nodded, trusting her completely. Back in the waiting room, my phone buzzed with messages. 3 different numbers: the school counselor, Craig's mom, and an unknown caller. Patricia watched me check the screen, making another note. Craig texted that his parents had found the forum printouts in his room. They wanted to talk to me immediately. Another crisis to add to the growing list. The school counselor's voicemail was brief but concerning. They needed me to come in for a psychiatric evaluation based on recent behavioral concerns. Patricia's influence reaching into every corner of my life. Dad dozed off in his chair while Patricia filled out more forms. I watched her forge his signature on several documents, her handwriting steadier than his had been. She caught me looking and smiled. Your father needs help, she said quietly. I'm the only one providing it. The rage built in my chest, but I forced it down. Any reaction would become evidence in her files. Every emotion I showed got twisted into proof of instability. Craig's mom called again. Patricia had offered to provide pro bono therapy for my escalating condition. The professional network she'd built was closing in, each colleague trusting her expertise. Dad woke up confused about where we were. Patricia guided him toward the exit, whispering soothing words while shooting me warning glances. I followed them out, carrying the prescription bag that seemed to get heavier with each step. In the parking lot, Patricia helped Dad into her car. He didn't question why I wasn't riding with him. She'd trained him well, creating distance between us without him realizing it. Go back to school, she told me. The counselor is expecting you. I stood there watching them drive away, Dad's head already drooping against the window. Patricia's systematic destruction of my life was accelerating. The psychiatric evaluation, Dad's medications, Craig's family getting pulled in. She was building her case methodically. Craig picked me up, his face grim. My parents are freaking out about the printouts. They think you're stalking Patricia or something. Another piece of her web falling into place. Every move I made to expose her became evidence of my obsession. Every attempt to protect Dad got reframed as interference with his treatment. The school evaluation request felt like a trap closing. Patricia had volunteered to oversee my therapy, the same woman who'd been live streaming my private moments to strangers. The system designed to protect people was being weaponized against me. She's building a case for involuntary commitment, I told Craig, and I've got no credible adult support left. The weight of it crashed down. Patricia controlled Dad's medications, his medical decisions, and his perception of reality. She'd influenced my school, Craig's family, and built a professional network that validated her every move. The forum posts were just one piece of a much larger operation. Craig drove while I stared at the prescription bag. Inside were pills that were supposed to help Dad's anxiety, but seemed to be making him worse. Patricia's therapeutic medication management was keeping him docile and confused. What are you going to do? Craig asked. I thought about Mom's grave, the daisies I'd left there last Saturday. She'd trusted the system too, sought help when she needed it. Patricia had been her counselor for 2 months before she died. The connection felt important, but I couldn't prove anything yet. Patricia's draft article surfaced in my mind. Therapeutic interventions for violent grief in male adolescents. She was documenting everything for publication, using clinical language to disguise personal details. My life reduced to a case study. The school loomed ahead. The counselor would be waiting with Patricia's assessment, ready to pathologize normal teenage responses to extraordinary manipulation. Each professional convinced they were helping while enabling Patricia's agenda. Drop me at the library instead, I told Craig. I need to research something. If Patricia was building a case against me, I needed to build one against her. But I had to be smarter than Mom had been. Whatever she'd discovered about Patricia, she hadn't been able to act on it in time. The forum posts were evidence, but not enough. Patricia's control over Dad's medications was concerning, but she had legal documents supporting it. The live streaming was criminal, but the site was gone. I needed something bigger, something that would make professionals question Patricia's motives despite her credentials. The psychiatric evaluation could wait. I had research to do first. Craig dropped me off with a worried look. Be careful, man. She's got everyone convinced you're dangerous. I nodded, hefting the prescription bag. Inside the library library, I'd start piecing together Patricia's history. There had to be a pattern. Other families she'd helped, other teenagers she'd labeled as dangerous. The librarian smiled as I entered. Normal, everyday kindness from someone who didn't see me as a case study or a threat. I held on to that feeling as I headed for the computers. Patricia thought she'd isolated me completely, but she'd made one mistake. She'd taught me to document everything. Time to use her own methods against her. The library computers were old, but functional. I settled into a corner station and started searching. Patricia's name brought up professional profiles, conference presentations, published papers. Everything looked legitimate on the surface. I dug deeper, searching variations of her name with different states. A cached page from 5 years ago showed Patricia working at a clinic in Oregon. The clinic's website no longer existed, but archived pages revealed it had closed abruptly. No explanation given. My phone vibrated. The school counselor again, then a text from Dad asking where I was. Patricia must have prompted him to check on me. I turned the phone to silent and kept searching. Oregon licensing board records were public. Patricia's license there showed as voluntarily surrendered with no details. But cross-referencing with local news archives from that time revealed more. A family had filed complaints about boundary violations. Their teenage son had been under Patricia's care for grief counseling after losing his father. The parallels made my skin crawl. I printed everything, watching the pages emerge slowly from the ancient printer. Each document felt like ammunition, but I needed more. Patricia's dissertation came up in an academic database. The abstract discussed innovative intervention strategies for adolescent grief. Her proposed methodology section had been flagged by the ethics committee. She'd wanted to study grief responses in real time, documenting subjects without full disclosure. I checked the time. 2 hours had passed. Craig texted that his parents wanted me out of their house by tonight. Patricia's influence was working faster than I'd expected. The reference librarian approached, noticing my stack of printouts. She glanced at them, then at me, recognition flickering across her face. She'd probably seen Patricia's social media posts about warning signs and grieving teens. I gathered my papers quickly and moved to a different section. From there, I could see her making a phone call, glancing my way. Time was running out. Back at the computer, I found Patricia's sister on social media, a nurse in another state. She'd posted about losing time during a difficult period 5 years ago. Patricia had helped her through grief by managing her medications. The post stopped abruptly for 6 months, then resumed with vague references to memory issues. My hands shook as I printed more evidence. Patricia's pattern was clear. She targeted vulnerable families, positioned herself as essential, then systematically broke down the problem family member. But believing it and proving it were different things. The library security guard appeared, walking slowly through the stacks. The librarian must have called about a concerning teenager. I stuffed the printouts into my backpack and headed for the exit, trying to look casual. Outside, I had nowhere to go. Craig's house was off limits. Home meant walking into Patricia's trap. I started walking, needing time to think. My phone showed 12 missed calls. Dad, the school, Craig's mom, numbers I didn't recognize. Patricia was mobilizing everyone, painting me as unstable and dangerous. Each unanswered call would be documented as avoidance behavior. I ducked into a coffee shop and spread out my printouts. The Oregon family's son was named Benj. His story matched mine. Cameras installed for safety, medications managed by Patricia, systematic isolation from support systems. He'd been hospitalized for acute psychological distress after 6 months of Patricia's treatment. The barista kept glancing at me. I probably looked exactly like what Patricia described. Paranoid, obsessive, documenting frantically. The irony wasn't lost on me. To prove I wasn't crazy, I had to act in ways that looked crazy to observers. My phone rang again. This time it was my aunt. I answered, desperate for family support. She sounded cautious, distant. Patricia had sent her articles about teenage violence after maternal loss. My aunt mentioned a documentary Patricia had recommended about warning signs in grieving adolescents. Every word sounded rehearsed, like Patricia had coached her on what to say. I tried explaining about the cameras, the medication management, the forum posts. My aunt listened, but I could hear the doubt. Patricia had gotten to her first, framing my concerns as delusions. After hanging up, I noticed a woman at a nearby table watching me. She looked familiar, one of Patricia's colleagues from a conference photo I'd found online. She was typing on her phone, probably reporting my location. I left immediately, walking fast but not running. Running would look like flight behavior. Patricia had taught me to see my every action through her clinical lens, to second-guess normal responses. The park where Mom used to take me was empty in the late afternoon. I sat on the same bench where she'd told me about the baby, about how I'd be a big brother. She'd been seeing Patricia for prenatal anxiety by then. I pulled out Mom's journal, which I'd grabbed during our break-in. Her handwriting grew shaky in the final entries. She described feeling foggy after sessions, questioning her own memories. Patricia had suggested increasing her anxiety medication for the baby's safety. One entry stood out. P says my concerns about her methods are hormonal paranoia, but I looked up her credentials. Something doesn't add up. Need to document more before acting. Mom had seen through Patricia, but hadn't moved fast enough. Now I was racing against the same clock. Craig texted a warning. His mom had called Patricia for guidance about handling a troubled teen influence on her children. Patricia was offering to conduct emergency family counseling to assess the threat I posed to Craig's siblings. I walked to the one place Patricia couldn't spin into pathology, Mom's grave. The cemetery was peaceful, removed from Patricia's web of influence. I sat beside the headstone and organized my evidence. The printouts told a clear story, but Patricia would dismiss them as selective research by a delusional teenager. I needed someone with credentials to review them, someone outside Patricia's network. Mom's colleague from the hospital, Dr. Chen, had sent flowers to the funeral. She'd known Mom professionally, might remember Patricia's involvement. It was worth trying. The hospital's main entrance felt exposed, but I had no choice. Dr. Chen was finishing rounds when I found her. She recognized me immediately, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. I showed her everything quickly. The Oregon case, Patricia's dissertation, Mom's journal entries. Dr. Chen's frown deepened as she read. She remembered Mom mentioning concerns about her counselor, but had attributed it to pregnancy anxiety. Dr. Chen couldn't officially intervene, but gave me contact information for a medical ethics board member. She also mentioned that Mom's OBGYN Chen, had questioned some medication interactions before her death. The investigation had been dropped after Patricia provided documentation. Security approached as we talked. Someone had reported a distressed teenager in the hospital. Dr. Chen vouched for me, but I could see she was conflicted. Patricia's narrative was powerful. A grieving boy fixating on his stepmother, creating conspiracy theories to avoid processing loss. I left through a side exit, clutching the ethics board contact information. The sun was setting. I had nowhere to sleep. No allies left who weren't under Patricia's influence. My phone battery was dying. The last text from Dad was simple. Please come home. We can help you. Patricia's words through his fingers. I found myself at Craig's house despite his parents' ultimatum. His mom answered the door, her face a mix of sympathy and fear. She'd been reading Patricia's blog posts about when grieving teens become dangerous. She let me grab my things, but watched carefully, like I might snap. Craig wasn't home, probably kept away for his safety. I stuffed clothes into a bag, feeling like the runaway Patricia had painted me as. Craig's mom mentioned Patricia had offered to help with her custody case pro bono. The price was clear: distance her family from my negative influence. Another family pulled into Patricia's orbit through manufactured crisis. I spent that night in the park, using my jacket as a blanket. Every hour made Patricia's case stronger. A teenager sleeping rough, avoiding school, obsessively researching his stepmother. It all fit her narrative perfectly. Morning brought new complications. My phone, charged at a 24-hour diner, showed messages from teachers. Patricia had met with them about therapeutic classroom strategies for my condition. She'd suggested my grief could manifest as academic disruption, preparing them to document any behavior as symptoms. I couldn't go to school. Every interaction would be filtered through Patricia's framework, but staying away would be seen as truancy, another symptom of deterioration. The medical ethics board member Dr. Chen had mentioned work downtown. I cleaned up in a public restroom and tried to look presentable. First impressions mattered when challenging a licensed professional. The meeting was brief. He listened, reviewed my documents, but his expression remained neutral. Patricia was a respected colleague. Without concrete proof of harm, he could only suggest I file a formal complaint. The process would take months, require hearings where Patricia would present her own documentation. I left feeling defeated. The system protected its own. Patricia knew this, had counted on it. My uncle called as I wandered downtown. Patricia had reached out to him, explaining my fixation as transferred maternal attachment. He wanted to help but didn't understand that psychology stuff. Patricia was the expert after all. Each conversation felt like losing another piece of my support network. Patricia was systematically cutting me off from anyone who might question her narrative. I returned to the library, desperate for more evidence. The same librarian was there, watching me suspiciously. I found a different section and continued searching. Patricia's forum posts had escalated. She was asking for advice about involuntary commitment procedures. The responses were split, some supporting her concerns, others questioning the ethics. But even the doubters framed it as professional disagreement, not abuse. School security found me there. The counselor had reported me as truant with concerning behavior patterns. They escorted me to the administrative office where Patricia was waiting. She'd volunteered to provide emergency counseling, free of charge. Her performance was flawless. The concerned stepmother, the compassionate professional. She spoke about my recent behaviors with clinical detachment while radiating maternal worry. The principal had already signed off on her involvement. I was trapped in a room with a woman who'd been live streaming my private moments, and everyone saw her as my salvation. Patricia suggested we start with a therapeutic conversation about my feelings. Every word I said would be documented, twisted into evidence. But refusing would be seen as resistance to treatment. I played along, giving vague answers about missing mom, struggling with changes. Patricia nodded sympathetically while taking notes. Her questions were carefully designed to elicit responses she could pathologize. When she asked about my research into her background, I saw the trap: admit to it and confirm my obsession, deny it and be caught in a lie. I stayed silent, which she documented as selective mutism when confronted. The session ended with Patricia recommending intensive outpatient therapy. The principal agreed immediately. I was scheduled for daily sessions, mandatory attendance, all documented for the commitment case she was building. Walking home because I had nowhere else to go, I found Dad in the living room. He looked worse, pale, confused, hands trembling slightly. Patricia's medication management was taking its toll. He tried to talk about getting help, using Patricia's exact phrases. The words came out jumbled, like he was reading from a script he didn't understand. I wanted to shake him, make him see what was happening, but that would only feed Patricia's narrative. That night, I heard Patricia on the phone with colleagues. She was discussing my case in clinical terms, building professional consensus around her assessment. Each call strengthened her position. I lay in my closet, avoiding the cameras, planning my next move. The commitment hearing was coming. Patricia had weeks of documentation, professional support, and a system designed to trust credentials over truth. All I had were printouts, and the word of a teenager everyone thought was unstable. But Mom had started this same fight. Maybe her evidence combined with mine would be enough. The thought of what came next made my stomach turn, but Patricia had taught me something valuable. Documentation was power. Time to use her weapons against her. Tomorrow, I'd return to that library computer. Benj from Oregon might still be hospitalized, but his family had tried to fight. Maybe they'd failed alone, but together, our stories might carry weight. Patricia thought she'd won by isolating me. She didn't realize she'd also freed me from caring what anyone thought. When you've lost everything, you've got nothing left to lose. The library computer search revealed more about Benj's family. They'd filed a complaint with Oregon's licensing board that Patricia had manipulated therapeutic boundaries. The case documents were sealed, but a news article mentioned the family had moved away after their son's hospitalization. I found Patricia's sister through nursing board records. She worked at a facility 3 states away, specializing in memory care. Her LinkedIn showed a 6-month gap in employment history, exactly when Patricia had been helping her. My phone buzzed constantly. Dad's work had called, needing Patricia's assessment about his fitness to return. She'd been reporting cognitive episodes that made them question his capability. Another thread in her web. I printed everything, stuffing pages into my backpack. The librarian watched from her desk, hand hovering near the phone. Time to leave. Outside, I called my aunt back. She mentioned watching a documentary Patricia had recommended about teenage violence after loss. Patricia was curating my family's entire understanding of grief, feeding them carefully selected narratives that supported her diagnosis. Patricia recommending documentaries about teenage violence to worried relatives is like handing someone a horror movie before their first camping trip. Technically educational, but definitely not helping the situation here. The medical ethics board member hadn't helped, but his secretary had whispered something as I left. A support group for families dealing with therapeutic abuse met downtown on Thursdays. Not official, not advertised, just people who'd been through similar situations. Thursday was tomorrow. I needed somewhere to sleep tonight. The park was too exposed now. Security had started regular patrols after complaints about vagrant youth. I remembered an old maintenance shed near the cemetery that groundskeepers rarely checked. Walking there, I noticed Patricia's influence spreading further. A neighbor crossed the street when she saw me coming. Parents at the playground pulled their children closer. Patricia's social media posts about warning signs and grieving teens had done their work. The shed was musty but dry. I spread out my evidence by phone light, organizing everything chronologically. Patricia's pattern emerged clearly across multiple families, but patterns weren't proof. My phone died around midnight. No charger, no way to track Patricia's escalating posts. In the darkness, I thought about Mom's final journal entry. She'd been building a case too, gathering evidence before confronting anyone. She'd run out of time. Morning came with hunger and stiffness. I walked to a gas station, bought food with my last $20, and noticed my photo on a missing person flyer by the register. Maybe experiencing psychological distress, it read. Contact family immediately. The Thursday support group met in a church basement. I arrived early, watching others filter in. A woman with tired eyes, a man clutching a folder of documents, a couple holding hands tightly, all carrying the same haunted look I saw in my reflection. The facilitator introduced herself as someone who'd lost custody of her daughter to a therapist who documented her into looking unstable. No credentials, no official authority, just shared experience. Stories emerged slowly. A therapist who'd convinced a father his grief made him dangerous to his children. A counselor who'd isolated a widow from her support system while managing her medications. Each story different in details, identical in pattern. When my turn came, I showed my evidence. The room grew quiet as I explained about the cameras, the live streaming, Patricia's systematic destruction of my life. Several people nodded in recognition. An older man spoke up. His nephew had been Patricia's patient 6 years ago in another state. The boy had ended up institutionalized after Patricia documented months of escalating behaviors. The family had tried to fight but lacked resources. The facilitator took notes, explaining that while they couldn't take official action, they maintained a database of complaints. Patricia's name appeared multiple times across different states. She'd surrendered licenses voluntarily before investigations could complete, then relocated and started again. A woman offered practical advice. Document everything but assume Patricia was doing the same. Avoid confrontation that could be twisted into aggression. Focus on protecting Dad rather than exposing Patricia. Courts responded better to protective actions than accusations. The group ended with exchanged contacts and quiet encouragement. I wasn't alone anymore, even if none of us had power within the system. Walking back toward downtown, I decided to check on Dad despite the risk. Patricia would be at her afternoon clients. I could assess how bad his condition had become. The house felt different. Patricia had rearranged furniture again, creating clear sightlines from her office to every room. New cameras blinked in corners. She was preparing for something. Dad sat in the living room, staring at nothing. His hands shook as he tried to hold a coffee mug. Empty medication bottles lined the kitchen counter. Patricia's therapeutic management in action. I found her latest notes on the dining table. She'd scheduled an emergency intervention for tomorrow. The commitment papers were already filled out, waiting for a final incident to justify immediate action. In her office, I discovered something worse. Patricia had been corresponding with Mom's old OBGYN, requesting records for a research project about prenatal anxiety and tragic outcomes. She was trying to posthumously diagnose Mom with conditions that would support her theories. A car door slammed outside. Patricia was home early. I slipped out the back door as she entered through the front, but not before seeing Dad struggle to stand and greet her. She guided him to his chair with practiced care, the perfect image of a devoted wife. That night in the shed, I made a decision. The support group had given me contacts for lawyers who understood therapeutic abuse, journalists who'd covered similar cases, and advocates who worked outside official channels. Patricia's emergency intervention was tomorrow. I had hours to act. I spent the night writing everything down, not emotional appeals or accusations, but simple chronological facts, times, dates, documents, patterns, the kind of evidence that spoke for itself. Dawn brought the sound of sirens, multiple cars heading toward my neighborhood. Patricia had made her move. I reached the house to find police cars outside. Patricia stood on the porch, tears streaming down her face as she explained how I'd threatened her during a psychotic break. Dad stood behind her, confused and swaying, mumbling agreement to whatever she said. The officers approached carefully. I kept my hands visible, movements slow. One recognized me from the support group. His sister had shared her story yesterday. He couldn't help openly, but he made sure I was processed by the book. No rough handling, no escalation. At the station, I asked for my phone call, not a lawyer, the advocate from the support group. She arrived within an hour with a civil rights attorney who specialized in false imprisonment cases. Patricia's emergency commitment petition fell apart quickly. She'd claimed I'd threatened her, but security footage from neighboring houses showed I'd never approached the front door. Her timeline didn't match. The weapons she'd photographed in my room were sports equipment any teenager would own. The attorney had pulled Patricia's history across multiple states, surrendered licenses, sealed complaints, families who'd fled rather than fight, pattern evidence that even protective services couldn't ignore. By afternoon, investigators were taking my statement seriously. The live streaming site had been traced through cached data. Financial records showed Patricia's income from subscriptions. The forum posts demonstrated premeditation. Dad's medical evaluation revealed dangerous medication interactions. Patricia had been prescribed the same medication she was giving him, stockpiling her own while overdosing him. The fog was lifting as doctors adjusted his treatment. Patricia's colleagues distanced themselves as evidence mounted. Her carefully built network crumbled when faced with legal scrutiny. The image she'd cultivated couldn't withstand documentation of actual crimes. The commitment hearing became an investigation into Patricia. Her tears seemed genuine as she insisted she'd been helping, that her research would save lives. The delusion ran deep. deep. She truly believed her own narrative. Other families came forward. Benji's family had been waiting for someone else to speak first. Patricia's sister confirmed memory gaps and medication management. The pattern was undeniable. Dad's recovery was slow. Each day brought more clarity, but also horror at what he'd enabled. We started family therapy with a carefully vetted counselor who understood trauma and coercive control. Patricia faced multiple charges. The legal process would take months, maybe years, but she'd lost her power to practice, to access vulnerable families, to document children for her twisted research. I returned to school with support services in place. Some people still believed Patricia's narrative, but others recognized the truth. Craig's family apologized, understanding how they'd been manipulated. The support group celebrated quietly. Another predator stopped, another family protected. We all knew Patricia wasn't unique. The system that enabled her still existed. I visited Mom's grave with fresh daisies and updates. Her journal had helped build the case. She'd seen through Patricia but hadn't lived to stop her. Now her evidence had protected others. Dad sold the house. Too many cameras, too many memories. We found a small apartment near his work, starting over with careful trust and ongoing therapy. Patricia's trial revealed the full scope. Dozens of families across 5 states. Years of research that destroyed lives. She maintained she'd been helping, even as victims testified. The verdict brought relief, but not celebration. Patricia would serve time, receive mandatory psychiatric treatment. Other families would pursue civil suits. Precedents would be set. I kept attending the support group, sharing my story with new members who arrived carrying familiar pain. We couldn't fix the system, but we could validate each other's experiences. Life continued with permanent changes. Trust came harder. Privacy felt precious. But I'd learned to document everything, to recognize manipulation, to protect myself and others. The cameras were gone, but I still checked corners out of habit. Patricia was locked away, but her influence lingered in small traumas and careful behaviors. Recovery wasn't a destination, but a daily choice. Some days were harder than others, but I was free. Dad was healing, and Patricia's research would never harm another family. That's the real ending. Not dramatic justice, but quiet survival. Moving forward with scars, but also wisdom. Building a life that Patricia had tried to steal. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, I brought daisies to Mom's grave and told her we'd won. This is end of the story. The legal system finally catching up to Patricia. Bye-bye, Patricia. I'll see you guys in the next story. Subscribe for more.